I left the office at 11:47 on a Tuesday because my migraine had been building since morning, and my manager told me to go home before I put my head through the monitor. It was the kind of headache that sits right behind your left eye and pulses in rhythm with every fluorescent light overhead. I grabbed my bag, said goodbye to no one in particular, and drove home through streets that were quiet, the way Tuesday streets always are, unhurried, ordinary, completely unaware of what I was about to walk into. Our house was a 20-minute drive from downtown. I had taken that route hundreds of times. I knew every turn, every traffic light that liked to hold too long on red, every house on my block with the same tired landscaping. Everything felt the same until I turned onto our street and saw my best friend's car parked in front of my driveway. Not on the curb, in the driveway, the way you park when you plan to stay a while. I sat in my car for a moment, engine still running, staring at that silver sedan like it owed me an explanation. My best friend and I had been close since college, 14 years of inside jokes, emergency phone calls, and the kind of friendship that makes you forget you're two separate people sometimes. She worked from home on Tuesdays. My husband worked from home every day. There was no reason for me to feel anything strange about this. They knew each other well. They liked each other. We were all friends. And yet, I turned off the engine. I didn't call out when I came through the front door. I don't know why. Some instinct, the same one that makes you hold your breath when a room feels wrong, kept me quiet as I set my bag down on the entry table without making a sound. The house felt too settled, not empty, but arranged, like a room that had been lived in carefully. I could hear music coming from upstairs. My husband liked to work with music on, low volume, usually something instrumental. The sound drifted down the staircase and wrapped around the hallway with a casualness that made my chest tighten for no reason I could name. My migraine pulsed once, hard, and then I started climbing the stairs. The door to the home office was cracked open, just enough for a sliver of afternoon light to fall across the hallway floor. I moved toward it the way you move when you already know the answer to a question you're still pretending you haven't asked. I pushed the door open. They were sitting on the small couch we kept along the wall for when clients visited remotely. My husband's laptop was open on the coffee table. My best friend was leaning into him, her head nearly on his shoulder, one hand resting on his knee with the kind of ease that doesn't happen by accident. He was saying something low and quiet, and she was laughing, soft and private and entirely at home in a room she had no business feeling at home in. They saw me at the same moment. My best friend sat up fast. My husband's expression cracked open into something that looked like guilt trying to arrange itself into confusion. Nobody spoke. The music kept playing, indifferent and small, while all three of us stayed perfectly still. What I did next surprised even me. I looked past them, past the frozen expressions and the guilty hands pulled apart, and I looked at the laptop screen. I don't know what made me look there first. Maybe it was because I'm a visual person by trade, and the screen was the brightest thing in the room. Or maybe some part of me already understood that this wasn't just about the two people sitting on a couch. What I saw on that screen made my migraine disappear entirely. It was a spreadsheet. My husband's spreadsheet, the kind he made when he was planning something. He color-coded everything green for income, red for expenses, yellow for projected. I had seen enough of his planning documents over the years to recognize the format immediately. But this one had my name in it, column C. Listed under current assets. There was a number next to my name that I recognized. It was the exact amount that had arrived in our joint account 4 months ago, my father's life insurance payout, transferred after probate finally closed. The money I had been grieving over almost as much as I had been grieving him, because every time I thought about it, I thought about him. Below my name, in the yellow column, was a date, 3 weeks from now, and next to the date, a destination account number I had never seen before. I looked at my husband, then at my best friend, then back at the screen. I walked across the room, reached past my husband's shoulder, and took the laptop. He started to say something. I held up one hand and he stopped. I walked out of the office. I closed the door. And then I turned the lock, the small brass key lock we had installed last year when we converted the spare room and wanted the option of keeping it secured when clients visited. The key was on the hook beside the door, where we always kept it. The lock clicked and I stood in the hallway holding my husband's laptop against my chest, listening to the silence on the other side of the door last exactly 2 seconds before it broke. "What are you doing?" my husband said. "Open the door." My best friend's voice was higher than usual. "We need to talk to you," my husband said. "Just open it. This isn't what you think." I walked down the hallway, down the stairs, and I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet beneath the sink because I needed something solid and cold and I didn't want to sit on furniture that he had also sat on. I opened the laptop. The spreadsheet was still on the screen. I scrolled. The document was 12 pages long. I found that out by pressing Control-End and watching the cursor fly to the bottom. 12 pages of planning, dates, account numbers, projected balances, a section labeled Phase 2 Business Entity Formation with my best friend's name listed as co-founder alongside my husband's, a business I had never heard of, in an industry neither of them worked in, funded entirely by money that had come from my father's death. My hands were not shaking. I want to make sure that's clear. They were completely steady. I opened my husband's email. His inbox was organized the same way his spreadsheets were, with folders and subfolders and labels I could navigate because I had watched him build the system. I went directly to the folder labeled with her name, my best friend's name, spelled out in full, tucked between a folder for our mortgage documents and a folder for his car insurance. I don't know how long I sat on that kitchen floor. Long enough that the light through the window shifted. Long enough that upstairs, they had stopped knocking and moved to something worse, low. Careful voices working through what to do, leaking through the floorboards just enough to hear the shape of the conversation without the words. Then I called my best friend's husband. Marcus picked up on the second ring. He was cheerful in that afternoon call way, unsuspecting, probably at his desk. I had known Marcus for almost as long as I had known his wife. He had walked her down the aisle at their wedding because her father hadn't shown up. He coached their son's soccer team on Saturday mornings. He was one of the steadiest people I had ever met, and the sound of his voice made something crack open in the center of my chest, not grief, not yet. Just the specific pain of having to do something that cannot be undone. I told him where his wife was. I told him what I had found. I said, "I need you to come over. And I need you to see this for yourself before anyone has time to change anything." There was a silence on his end that lasted 4 seconds. I counted. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, he said. He was there in 12. I opened the door before he knocked. He was still in his work clothes, his tie loosened, his expression doing the careful thing that men do when they are holding themselves together through sheer effort of will. He looked at me, and then he looked at the laptop I was carrying and his jaw tightened. "They're upstairs," I said. "I locked them in the home office." Something moved through his face that I recognized because I had felt it myself 20 minutes earlier. That particular reconfiguration when the world shifts 2 degrees and everything you were sure about requires re-examination. "Show me," he said. We sat at the kitchen table. I opened the laptop and turned it toward him and watched him read. He was the kind of reader who went still and quiet when the material was serious. He went very still. He went very quiet. His eyes moved down the screen with the systematic focus of someone who handles contracts for a living, and I watched the color change in his face the way weather changes gradually and then all at once. "This is her account number," he said, pointing at the screen. Not a question. "I assumed so," I said. "This is our joint account number." His voice was flat. "The joint account we opened for the house renovation last year. She told me she closed it." I didn't say anything. He scrolled further. He found the email thread. He read it without expression, though his hand had moved to the table's edge and his fingers had closed around it. I could hear them upstairs now, moving, murmuring, the sound of someone trying the office door handle again and finding it still locked. Marcus sat back slowly. He was quiet for a long moment. "How long?" he asked. "The earliest email I found was 7 months ago," I said. He exhaled once, the kind of exhale that carries something heavy out of the body and leaves a different kind of weight behind. "Our son is at school," he said quietly. Not to me, more to himself, just establishing facts. Orienting. I understood that impulse completely. "He gets out at 3:15, I said. Marcus nodded slowly. Then he straightened, And something changed in his posture, the way it changes in people when they decide to stop absorbing a situation and start moving through it. He looked at me directly. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to document everything before they have any opportunity to touch it," I said. "And then I want to call someone who can tell me exactly how much legal exposure they have." Marcus pulled out his phone. "My firm has a financial crimes attorney," he said. "She worked white-collar before she went private practice. If this is what it looks like, this isn't just a marriage problem. It's fraud," I said. The word felt clean in my mouth. Specific. Useful. He added himself to the account my father's insurance paid into. I didn't authorize any transfers. He was planning to move almost $200,000 in 3 weeks. Marcus was already dialing. Her name was Patricia, and she arrived an hour later with a legal pad, a digital recorder, and the kind of focused energy that makes rooms feel smaller. She was in her mid-50s, and she had the particular composure of someone who had heard worse and was prepared to hear worse still. She shook my hand, shook Marcus's hand, set her legal pad on the kitchen table, and said, "Tell me everything from the beginning." While I talked, Marcus went upstairs and stood outside the office door. I could hear him through the ceiling, one voice, measured, asking questions and receiving answers that came in layers I couldn't distinguish. What I did hear, clearly, were the pauses, the specific silence of someone trying to formulate a response to a thing that cannot be satisfactorily explained. Patricia took notes. She asked precise questions. When I showed her the laptop, she put on reading glasses and went through every file with the thoroughness of someone building something that would need to hold weight in a formal setting. "Did you authorize him to access the account your father's insurance paid into?" she asked. "It was a joint account," I said. "I added him when we got married. I never considered that a risk." She nodded. "And the account listed as the destination, you had no knowledge of it?" "None." She removed her glasses. "The transfer hadn't been initiated yet." "That works in your favor. We have time to freeze the account and file a protective order before anything moves. The business formation documents are more complicated, but if she transferred any funds from the joint renovation account, the one she told her husband was closed, that's a separate matter." Upstairs, Marcus's voice went very quiet. Then, it went silent altogether. I looked at the ceiling. Patricia followed my gaze. "How long have they been up there?" "About 2 hours," I said. She made a small sound that wasn't quite a laugh. People have a tendency to be very honest when they've had 2 hours to run out of other options. She was right about that. We went upstairs. I unlocked the door. My husband came out first. He was wearing the expression I had seen him use in difficult conversations: contained, calibrated, ready to negotiate. He looked at Patricia and recalibrated slightly. Then he looked at Marcus, who was standing in the hallway with his arms crossed and his face entirely closed, and the calibration faltered. My best friend came out behind him. She had been crying not recently, but in the kind of sustained, exhausting way that leaves your face a different shape. She looked at me and then quickly looked away, which told me everything about where her guilt had actually landed. "Okay," my husband said. "I know how this looks." "How does it look?" I asked. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He tried again. "It's an investment," he said. "The business is real. I was going to tell you about it when it was further along. I didn't want to get your hopes up before we had the structure in place." "With my money?" I said. "With our money," he said. "We're married. Everything is. You moved yourself onto an account that was left to me by my father," I said, and the steadiness in my voice surprised me, in the same way it had surprised me downstairs on the kitchen floor. "Without telling me, and then you drafted a 12-page document outlining how to transfer it before I noticed." He looked at Patricia. "Who is she?" "My attorney," I said. The calibration dropped entirely. My best friend spoke then, quietly and without looking at her husband. "It wasn't his idea," she said. The hallway went silent. Marcus turned toward her slowly. "It was mine," she said. Her voice was thin, like she was spending something she didn't have left. "I found the account when he was helping me with our tax documents last spring. I knew what it was. I was the one who said we should start the company. I was the one who said—" She stopped. She pressed her hand against her mouth briefly. "I thought it would be faster. That's all. I thought if we had the capital already in place, We could move quickly and pay it back before anyone. Before I what? I asked. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were red, and her face was open in the ugly, specific way that happens when a person has run out of performance. Before you missed it, she said. I had known her for 14 years. I had been in the room when she got the call about her mother's diagnosis. I had sat next to her through the lowest year of her life. She had known me through the same. And she had looked at money that came from my father's death and decided it was available. You thought I wouldn't miss it, I said. She didn't answer. That was an answer. Marcus stepped back from her slightly. Not dramatically, just enough to make the space between them visible in a way it hadn't been before. My husband started talking again. Faster now, the measured tone replaced by something more urgent. He said it was a misunderstanding of the timeline. He said he had planned to have the full conversation once the business was generating returns. He said the structure was designed to protect both of us, that he had consulted resources online, that Patricia was looking at draft documents, not final documents, that nothing had actually happened yet. Nothing happened yet, Patricia said, looking up from her legal pad. Is that your position? He faltered. Because the account was accessed twice in the last 6 weeks, she said. Small test withdrawals, $200 each. Standard practice for confirming account access before a larger transfer. She looked at him with an expression that was entirely neutral. Would you like to reconsider your position? He didn't say anything. I'd like to look at his phone, Marcus said, and the flatness in his voice was something I had never heard from him before. My husband did not hand over his phone. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned to Patricia. Is there a legal mechanism in a divorce proceeding? Yes, she said. Financial discovery is comprehensive. Every account, every device, every transaction. She looked at my husband again. And given the documentation we already have, we'd be asking for a forensic review. My husband sat down on the hallway floor with his back against the wall, which is not something I had ever seen him do in 8 years. And he put his hands over his face. My best friend started crying again, silently this time. Marcus walked away from her, down the hallway to the top of the stairs, where he stood looking at nothing with his hands in his pockets. I looked at all 3 of them, my husband on the floor, my best friend against the doorframe, Marcus at the stairs, and I felt something that wasn't triumph and wasn't grief and wasn't rage. It was the feeling of a world becoming smaller in scope and clearer in outline. The feeling of seeing something real, where before there had been something that looked real but wasn't. Patricia touched my arm lightly. I've seen enough for today, she said. I'll file the protective freeze tonight. By morning, he won't be able to touch anything in that account. I nodded. I'd also recommend you speak to your bank directly, she said. Remove him as a joint holder on the insurance account before the end of the week. It's your right, and it's straightforward. What about the other account? Marcus said, from the top of the stairs, without turning around. The renovation account she was supposed to close. Patricia looked at my best friend. If funds were withdrawn from an account your husband held a joint interest in, without his knowledge or authorization, that's a matter your own attorney should review. My best friend looked at the floor. I didn't steal anything, she said. The words came out defensively, but they had no real force behind them. She seemed to hear that herself, because she stopped and started again. I was going to put it back. When? Marcus said. She didn't answer. He finally turned around. He looked at her for a long time with an expression I had to look away from because it was too private to witness. Then he looked at me. I'm going to get our son from school, he said. And I'm going to take him somewhere for dinner, somewhere he likes. He paused. I don't want him to come home to this today. Of course, I said. He came down the hallway. He stopped beside me for a moment and put his hand briefly on my shoulder, not a gesture of romance or solidarity exactly, just a human acknowledgement of shared weight. Then he walked downstairs. A minute later, I heard the front door open and close. My husband stood up from the floor. He looked at me with an expression I didn't recognize at first, and then I recognized it as the face of someone who has been planning something for months, discovering that they have to live in real time now. We can fix this, he said. No, I said. I love you, he said. You loved the idea that I wouldn't look, I said. That's not the same thing. He flinched. Then he said, Where am I supposed to go? "That's not my problem to solve," I said. "You have tonight to get what you need." "Patricia, can you help me understand the legal parameters of that?" Patricia told him exactly what he could take, what he couldn't, and what would happen if he attempted to access any joint financial accounts before the protective order was processed. She told him clearly and without apparent emotion the way professionals deliver bad news to people who made the news themselves. He left an hour later with a bag. He tried to say something in the doorway, and I closed the door before the sentence finished. My best friend left shortly after. She tried to talk to me, really talk, the old way, the way we used to talk when there was nothing between us but honesty. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't know how things had gotten so far. She said she had been jealous of me, that she had watched me receive money she felt I hadn't needed because I had things she didn't, and that wasn't an excuse, but she wanted me to understand. I listened to all of it. I let her say every word. When she finished, I said, "I don't have any more to give you. I'm done," she cried. I believed the tears. I had known her 14 years and I believed she was genuinely in pain. I also believed she had made a choice, and then another choice, and then another, and that every one of them had been a choice she made knowing exactly who would pay the cost. She left. Patricia stayed another half hour and walked me through the next 3 weeks with the same methodical calm she had brought to everything else. What to expect from his attorney. What to expect from the bank. What to expect from my own emotions, which she addressed practically rather than tenderly, and for which I was grateful. When she left, the house was quiet in a way it had never been quiet before. I sat in the kitchen for a long time. Not in crisis, not numb either. Just present in the specific way you become present when the noise has finally stopped and what's left is only what's real. The refrigerator hummed. A neighbor's dog barked twice and went quiet. Light moved across the kitchen floor as the afternoon shifted toward evening. My phone showed a text from Marcus. "Our son asked for pizza, getting extra cheese. Thank you for calling me." I typed back, "Thank you for coming." He replied, "Take care of yourself tonight." I put the phone face down on the table and looked at the kitchen around me. It was a kitchen I had chosen carefully, the countertops, the backsplash, the warm light over the sink that I had asked the electrician to install lower than standard because I liked the way it fell across the room at night. It was a kitchen in a house I had put years into making into something I loved. It was still that. None of what I had found today had changed the kitchen. I made tea. I sat down. I looked at the protection order Patricia had left a draft of, and I read it carefully, and I signed where she had indicated. 2 months later, the divorce proceedings were moving forward without drama. My husband had retained an attorney who was efficient and uninterested in prolonging things, which suited me. The financial investigation Patricia had initiated uncovered 3 additional accounts he had opened over the past year, all tied to the business that had never actually been incorporated. He had not, it turned out, been as organized as his spreadsheet suggested. Marcus and his wife had separated. He had found other things in the renovation account records, smaller transactions, older ones, patterns that stretched back further than the 7 months I had identified. He was methodical about it in the same way he was methodical about everything, and he was also, underneath that, quietly devastated in the way that men like Marcus are devastated. Privately, thoroughly, without announcement. We talked sometimes. Nothing romantic that wasn't what either of us needed, and we both knew it. We talked the way people talk when they have been through something similar and have arrived in a similar place and find the company of someone else who is also rebuilding useful and uncomplicated. He brought his son over one Saturday, and the 3 of us ate lunch on the back porch, and it was the most ordinary afternoon I had experienced in months, which was exactly what I needed. I started seeing a therapist. I started going to bed at a reasonable hour instead of lying awake cataloging everything I had missed. I started cooking the things I liked to cook rather than the things that were easy and designed for 2 people who are mostly not paying attention to each other. One morning, I drove past the office where I used to work with my migraine pulsing behind my left eye, and I realized I hadn't had a headache in 3 weeks. I thought about that for a moment. I thought about how much of my body had been trying to tell me something for longer than I had been willing to hear. The house felt different now. Not empty, just accurate. Sized correctly for the person actually living in it. I had lunch with a friend from college one afternoon. Someone who hadn't been part of any of it. Someone who had known me before my husband and before the 14-year friendship and before all of it. She asked me how I was doing, and I thought about it, actually thought about it, rather than offering the reflexive answer. And I said, I'm better than I was, and I'm going to be better than I am. She looked at me across the table and said, You seem different. I am, I said. She asked how, and I thought about that too. I stopped treating trust like a virtue that could be hoarded, I said finally. Like the more I gave it, the more it protected me. I trusted people because I was proud of how much I trusted them. And now I trust people because they've earned it, which turns out to be a much shorter list, but a much better one. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. People understand more than we give them credit for, usually. I drove home through the Tuesday streets, the same route, the same turns, the same traffic light that likes to hold too long on red. The radio played something I didn't know, and I left it on anyway. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my car for a moment after I turned off the engine, looking at the front of my house. No one else's car was parked there. I went inside,